and that's a huge step forward. The efforts to improve mobility and establish a process to enhance the speed at which NATO can make decisions, the fight against terrorism and increase in allied resilience against terrorist threats through a new framework to share biometric data is a major accomplishment. And finally, the opportunity for Macedonia to receive an invitation to join NATO and fulfill the promise from the Bucharest summit, that was a positive step for the alliance and for the Balkans. Could you comment on those very important steps forward that happened at this NATO summit?
Senator Risch, it was an incredibly productive NATO summit. From my conversations with Secretary General Stoltenberg, he said among the most productive that he had ever been part of. And he's been doing this a little while. You talked about the 430s, 30 squadrons, 30 battalions, and 30 naval combatants ready to go in 30 days. It's something NATO has not been able to do for quite some time. There's now a real commitment. We have to follow through to make sure that the implementation of that occurs. It would be a great thing to deter Russia if we can get those countries and our allies to get to that level. You talked about the increase in burden sharing. It seemed to get all the focus. It's certainly important that the Europeans are as committed to deterring Russia as the United States of America and need to demonstrate that through their defense, not only dollars, but readiness as well. We've seen reports about the absence of German readiness. They need to truly be ready. The President also raised another issue about energy and energy security at the NATO summit. He talked about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and the risk that creates to the alliance in the event that Russia should decide to use energy as a weapon to coerce either formally or informally Germany or other European countries. He raised it to the forefront, and frankly, there are European countries that understand that risk and support America and our position on that as well. And then finally, you talked a little bit about this, the NATO mission, its new role in fighting terrorism. I want to say thanks to so many of the European countries that have stepped forward. Even just this past few, I guess it's now 2 weeks since the NATO summit, over 1,000 additional commitments from allied NATO partners headed to assist us in Operation Resolute Support in Afghanistan. That's a great commitment, something that President Trump worked hard on at the summit, and really good outcomes for America.
Well, thank you so much. You're to be personally commended for those great successes, as is the President for leading in that regard. It's unfortunate that our friends and allies' feathers were ruffled a little bit just because we said they weren't paying their bills, but that's been going on for some time, and I think we're going to tolerate that. But they've got to step up, and I know you underscored that, and the President has certainly underscored that with them. I want to talk about Iran for just a moment. One of the big unreported stories as far as foreign relations is concerned is the issues and the difficulties that the Iranian people are having internally, financially and otherwise. And I know we're not in a classified setting, but there is some open reporting on these sources. And the regime that's there is struggling with this. Indeed, I think that's probably why they tried to poke the president the other day to try to take the heat off of the heat they're getting at home. Could you talk a little bit about what's going on internally, again, knowing that we're in an open setting?
Senator, there is enormous economic challenge inside of Iran today. It's an economic structure that simply doesn't work. When you foment that, when you're a country of that scale that foments terror through Lebanese Hezbollah, through Shia militias in Iraq, into Yemen, conducts assassination attempts in European countries, provides enormous support for Hafez Assad outside of Lebanese Hezbollah in Syria, that's expensive. And I think the Iranian people are beginning to see that that's not the model that they want, that the Iranian expansionism that the supreme leader Qasem Soleimani so favor is not what they're looking for. And I think you're beginning to see the economic impact combined with understandings inside of Iran of the kleptocracy that it is, leading to fundamental decisions that the Iranian people will ultimately have to make.
Do you agree with me that that acceleration of that understanding by the Iranian people has been very rapid over the last 6 months?
Yes, I think it's been going on longer than that, but yes,
It's
certainly.
been going on longer, but I'm talking about the acceleration.
Yes, Senator, I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I could, just one interjection. I know the phrase paying their bills has been used, and we need to, every NATO country needs to be contributing 2% to defense, and I've noticed those near the Russian border always do. But that's a misnomer, is it not? What we want them to do is contribute at least 2%. There's not, these NATO countries are not paying bills to the United States as sometimes is projected. Is that correct?
The shortfalls that the President identified really are in two buckets. There is a NATO common fund that is contributed to by every nation, and the United States is by far the largest contributor to that fund. And then there are monies that are paid for nations to raise their own militaries and to defend themselves. That's the 2% number to which we've been referring.
But it's not. It would be a mischaracterization to say, to make it appear that they're not paying bills to the United States.
That's correct.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Senator Cardin.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. It's my understanding that the President is going to invite Mr. Putin to the United States to follow up on the understandings reached in Helsinki. Can you just briefly tell me what those understandings or agreements reached in Helsinki at the meeting?
Sure. I can certainly share with you the things that we've been tasked to follow up on by President Trump following that meeting. There's a handful. So there is an agreement to establish some business-to-business leadership exchanges that historically had been undertaken but had fallen away. These would be business leaders that would participate in this. I understand that this went on for years and years and was ceased a handful of years ago.
If we could do it briefly. I understand you want to give a complete thing, and I appreciate that. But
it's what you asked for.
I understand that. Business to business. Next issue?
The President is asked us to look at reestablishing a counterterrorism council that was held at the level of the Deputy Secretary of State for many years, but had also ceased to happen. I think at this point, I think that makes sense.
Counterterrorism cooperation.
Counterterrorism. We are working to see in Syria what are the possibilities that can be achieved so that the now between 6 and 7 million externally displaced persons have the opportunity to return. We made clear this should happen through the political process in Geneva, but we are working to see if we can't get Russia to be more cooperative in terms of driving towards a political resolution there that would take down the violence levels and create some opportunity to begin a political resolution of the process in Syria.
Any discussions on sanctions? You said there was no easing of the sanctions.
No, Senator, no easing of the sanctions.
No,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was there any discussion about Magnitsky? Because certain names associated with Magnitsky came out in Helsinki. Was there any discussion with the President on the Magnitsky sanctions?
There's been no change in U.S. policy with respect to Magnitsky. I think I know what you're referring to. Let me make clear. The United States will defend our team in the field and the team that's been in the field when it retires and leaves the field. We understand that Americans deserve the protection of the United States of America both during their time in service and thereafter.
Was there any agreements reached in regards to Ukraine?
No, Senator, that's an agree to disagree. And that is, the U.S. policy hasn't changed, and you can see that, right?
And I understand.
$200 million since the Helsinki summit provided to the Ukrainians. I think there was lots of concern that, and I saw it, I could find you all's quotes if you'd like me to go drag them out, concerns that President Trump would make a change in position with respect to Ukraine.
And you made that clear.
And there is none. And it is a policy that the previous administration refused to undertake. And so I hear comparative. It's important, Senator. Comparison matters here because there's a narrative that is developed that somehow President Trump is weak on Russia, and when in fact the converse
let me just.
is true.
I heard you talk and brag about the number of sanctions.
Senator, these were just facts.
The facts is that the Congress passed the CATSA statute that required sanctions to be imposed. And there are sanctions that are to be imposed under CATSA that have not been imposed. And the facts are the administration has sought a waiver in regards to CATSA in regards to the National Defense Authorization Act. So I just really want to point out, and we've had this from previous administrations, but not as much as we're hearing today, that what Congress is requiring you to do, all of a sudden you found religion and taking credit for it.
Senator,
But in reality, you haven't implemented on time the sanctions that have been passed by Congress.
Senator, first of all, that's not true. We've passed a number of sanctions under the CATSA provisions, and it is also true, at least my best recollection of the Constitution, is the President signed that law as well. So
And he complained when he signed it.
I thank you for presenting that law. We appreciate it. We think it makes good sense. The President signed it as well. We have passed sanctions under that very law, and we have passed sanctions that Senator, you just have to know previous administrations didn't do.
Please read the President's comment when he signed the law, because it's very interesting, his comments. Let me move on to our policy in regards to nuclear proliferation in Iran and in North Korea, because I'm having a hard time understanding the comparison between these two countries. In North Korea, we have a country that has a nuclear weapon. The President has met with